After decades of hard work, I finally reached retirement. The day I left the company, I came home feeling light and free, practically humming as I walked through the door. I couldn't wait to pull out my bank card and take a good look at the savings I'd built over a lifetime, ready to start planning the peaceful, comfortable retirement I thought I'd earned. But the moment I saw the account balance, I froze. There was only $15,000 left. I stood there in stunned silence, my mind struggling to make sense of it. Maybe it was a glitch, a mistake in the system, something easily explained. I rushed to the bank and asked the teller to print out a transaction history for the past 5 years. What I saw only deepened the shock. Every single month without fail, $3,000 had been withdrawn. Like clockwork. My monthly salary was $8,000. And with Lewis's pension added in, I had always assumed we were in good shape. More than enough to live comfortably in our golden years. But reality didn't just slap me in the face. It knocked the wind out of me. My head spinning with questions, I went home and dug out Lewis's old ledger. He'd kept the household finances ever since we got married. It was one of his quirks. Meticulous records, every penny tracked. I'd never questioned it. I trusted him completely. I never thought I needed to look that closely. But now I had no choice. Every entry in that ledger was neatly written, down to the last cent. And what I discovered left me numb. Those monthly transfers hadn't started 5 years ago. They'd been going on for 30 years. What began as $500 a month had gradually grown to $3,000. Month after month. Year after year. Without interruption. And then I saw it. One small note scribbled in the margin next to the transaction line. Living expenses for Bianca and the kids. My mind went blank. For 30 years he had told me to cut back, to be frugal, to save for retirement. And all this time he was using my money to support his mistress and her children. I stood in the middle of the study, still holding the ledger in my hand, feeling like the punchline to a cruel joke. After nearly 40 years of loyal service at Smith Home Services, I finally made it to retirement. The moment I stepped out of the office on my last day, I headed straight to the bank, my debit card clutched in hand. It felt like the first official step into my new chapter. Finally, a life of rest, freedom, and maybe even a few adventures. My salary had always been solid, $8,000 a month. Add in Lewis's pension and we should have had a sizable nest egg by now. As I walked to the bank, my steps felt lighter than usual. I was already imagining a stop by a travel agency afterward. Maybe start planning a summer getaway to Lake Tahoe or the coast of Maine. But when I saw the account balance, I stopped breathing for a second. There was only $15,000 left. I thought I must have read it wrong. My hands were trembling as I walked to the counter. "Ma'am," the teller said gently, "this account shows a recurring monthly transfer of $3,000. The current balance is accurate." A sharp pain clenched in my chest. My knees almost buckled, and if it hadn't been for a kind stranger nearby who caught my elbow, I might have collapsed right there. I forced myself to stay composed and asked the teller to print a full transaction record for the past 5 years. The pages came out one by one, each one confirming the same gut-wrenching truth. $3,000 withdrawn every month without fail. Not a single one missed. The moment my paycheck hit the account, the money was already on its way out. 4 years I had deposited my salary into our joint account without a second thought. I never once questioned it. I never thought Lewis would touch that money without telling me. A rough estimate told me the truth was even worse. Just in the past 5 years, $180,000 had vanished. And if those transfers had been going on for 30 years, the total easily topped $1 million. I could feel myself unraveling. I didn't want to believe the worst of him. I didn't want to go there. But how could I trust him again after this? How could I pretend this wasn't betrayal? I left the bank and flagged down a cab, my mind in chaos the whole ride home. The moment I walked through the front door, I went straight to Lewis's study. He'd always kept old-school ledgers, handwritten, every dollar accounted for. He'd been doing it since his 20s. I used to think it was a sweet, reliable habit. A sign of how much he cared about our home, our life. But now it felt like a convenient way to hide the truth. I opened the ledger and the tears started before I even turned the second page. There it was. Monthly withdrawals, $3,000 each, recorded diligently for 30 years. Not a single gap. And next to the most recent entry he'd scribbled a note in the margin. Living allowance, Bianca and the kids. I went cold. Bianca Myers. The name cut through me like a rusted blade, slow and jagged, slicing through the deepest part of my trust. She was the woman Louis had once been infatuated with. We all grew up on the same block. Bianca was the kind of girl who commanded attention. Beautiful, bold, always standing in the spotlight. Louis, on the other hand, had been quiet and reserved. The kind of guy someone like Bianca wouldn't even glance at twice. He liked fireworks and drama. There was always a crowd around her, men trying to impress her. But then she got pregnant. No ring, no father in sight. And those admirers disappeared just as fast as they'd come. And Louis, he offered to pick up the pieces. Even when she never truly cared for him. Even when she looked right past him. He still held on. He still put her and her child first for decades. I'd always assumed it was just a harmless old crush, some foolishness from his youth. But it wasn't just a memory he tucked away. It was a commitment he never let go of. All these years he told me we needed to be frugal, warned me about the financial strain of retirement, urged me to be careful with spending. And I listened. I cut back. I tightened our budget. I believed he was doing it for us, for our future. But now I knew the truth. Every penny I saved was funneled into another woman's life. And her child's. I stood in the middle of the study, clutching the ledger, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. And then somewhere between the tears I laughed. Not a laugh of humor. A laugh of bitter realization. I was the joke. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting in the study, staring at nothing, my thoughts a tangled mess. It wasn't until I heard the jingle of keys and the front door creak open that I finally snapped out of it. Louis walked in and spotted me right away, standing in his study, ledger still in my hand. His expression darkened instantly. "What the hell are you doing in here without my permission?" he barked, his tone sharp, accusatory. I didn't answer. I tossed the ledger at him, letting it hit the floor near his feet. "Don't you think it's time you explained this?" There was a flicker of panic in his eyes, but he quickly tried to mask it. He adjusted his glasses and snatched the ledger off the floor, clutching it tightly to his chest like it was something sacred. "Stella, this is outrageous," he snapped coldly. "This is my personal record. Who gave you the right to go snooping?" That was the moment it hit me, crystal clear. All these years I wasn't a partner. I was a walking ATM. I'd worked myself to the bone, bringing in paycheck after paycheck, only for him to secretly funnel that money to support his old flame, and her children. And now, standing in front of me, he had the audacity to act like I was the one out of line. I stepped toward him, eyes locked on his face, and slapped him hard across the cheek. He staggered back in disbelief, stunned, silent. I had never hit him before, not once. I had always been the gentle one, the one who smoothed things over. That slap was decades of betrayal finally boiling to the surface. Seconds passed before he exploded. "You're insane. Have you lost your mind? How dare you hit me? We're married, your money is my money. What's the big deal if I spent some of it?" I stared at him, at the arrogant twist of his mouth, the entitlement in his voice, and I realized I didn't even recognize this man anymore. "Louis, if you're still hung up on Bianca, just say it. Don't insult me with this living allowance bullshit. This isn't charity, it's a damn affair in disguise." He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Bianca's an old friend. She's had a rough life. I was just helping out. That's all." His voice was casual, indifferent. But every word felt like a knife. "Helping out." I laughed bitterly. "With my money? You were helping your old flame and her kid live comfortably while I was pinching pennies, denying myself everything. I wouldn't even buy a decent pair of shoes, and you were showering her with money behind my back." The fury I'd held in for so long finally broke loose. I couldn't hold back anymore. My voice rose, sharp and shaking. "You let me live like we were barely scraping by while you played secret benefactor to the woman you couldn't let go of. You told me to be frugal, for our future. But all along, you were just funneling my sacrifices to someone else." Louis fell silent, staring at me like I'd wounded him. "Stella," he said softly, as if trying to sound hurt, "we've been married for decades. Is this really how little you think of me?" His voice was meant to guilt me, but it only made me feel sick. I remembered all the times I tried to protect his ego. When we were younger, he made less money than I did, and it ate at him. He was proud, fragile in his pride. So I let him handle the finances, thinking I was giving him a sense of control, a sense of dignity. But in the end, what I gave him wasn't dignity, it was opportunity. And he used it to betray me. I took a deep breath, voice trembling now. Do you remember when Matt was 10 and he fell down the stairs? He broke his leg, needed surgery. He furrowed his brow, said nothing. I begged you to pull out some savings to cover the medical bills, but you refused. Said the money was in a fixed-term deposit. Said it couldn't be touched. You told me to go borrow from neighbors, colleagues, anyone who'd help. Tears welled in my eyes again. That night, I knocked on door after door in a freezing storm, begging people to lend us money, while you were hoarding cash to raise her child. My fingertips were numb, but my heart felt like it was on fire. I looked him dead in the eye and said word by word, "You used my money to support another woman. That disgusts me." Lewis's face twisted. He gasped suddenly, his hand clutching his chest. He stumbled backward, his legs giving way beneath him, and collapsed onto the floor. I froze. For a second, everything around me went silent. Just me, him, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end I couldn't walk away. I knelt down and helped him up. No matter how deeply my heart had been shattered, we had shared 40 years of life together. I just couldn't bring myself to be completely indifferent. I took him to the hospital. After the doctors completed the initial examinations and arranged for further tests, I stepped out and called Matt. I told him to come and take care of his father. Then I turned around and walked out of the hospital, alone. I couldn't stand to look at Lewis anymore. Back home, the house felt oppressively quiet. The ticking of the clock in the living room echoed through the stillness, each second landing like a cold drop of water in an empty room. 40 years of marriage, undone by a ledger and a few handwritten notes. I thought back to the early days with Lewis. He wasn't a bad man. He was kind, even gentle in his own way. His only real flaw, if you could even call it that, was his stinginess. But stingy doesn't quite capture it. It was deep-rooted, obsessive frugality, almost pathological. I remembered one particular winter years ago. He bought huge sacks of potatoes and carrots just to save a few extra bucks. Even when the potatoes started sprouting, he refused to throw them out, said I could just cut around the bad parts and they'd be fine. That winter, I ended up in the emergency room with a serious case of food poisoning. Even then, I tried to reason with him, tried to be kind. "We've got some savings," I said. "We don't have to live like this." But he brushed it off, murmuring vague excuses about preparing for the future, always dodging the truth. I thought it was just a habit, a harmless quirk from a man who'd grown up poor. I never imagined he was hoarding money to support another woman and her child. The thought made my chest tighten again. I couldn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I went back into the study and flipped through the ledger again, line by line, calculating every last penny. By the time I finished, I was colder than before. Over the past 30 years, Lewis had transferred more than $1.3 million to Bianca. That wasn't just money. That was my life's work. Decades of labor, every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I'd held back for the sake of our future. And then, tucked in the very back of the ledger, I found an old photograph. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. In the picture stood Lewis, Matt, and Bianca, smiling, standing together on a sunny park lawn like one happy little family. I stared at that photo for a long time, barely breathing, unsure if what I was seeing was even real. In that moment, whatever strength I had left drained out of me. I sat down on the study sofa, the photo in my hand, and just sat there. Silent. So hollow. My entire life felt like a joke. A bitter smile crept across my face. I took out my phone and calmly began photographing every page of the ledger, every picture, every note. I saved everything. The next morning, Lewis came home from the hospital. He walked in with his head low, eyes filled with guilt, looking more like a scolded child than a grown man. Matt followed closely behind, giving him a subtle nod, encouraging him to speak. Lewis hesitated, then approached me and gently took my hand. His voice was low and his eyes were wet. "Stella, I'm sorry. I was too emotional yesterday. I shouldn't have said those things. Please don't hold it against me." He paused, then added, "I never told you because I didn't want you to worry. Bianca's had a hard life. She made some bad choices when she was young. Trusted the wrong man, ended up raising that child alone. That poor kid, he has a congenital heart condition. He's been in and out of hospitals since he was little." His voice cracked and a single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. His face was lined with sorrow and regret. Matt chimed in right away, picking up the thread. Mom, seriously. I mean, if you think about it, maybe this was just, I don't know, a way to do some good in the world. Bianca's life hasn't been easy. Try to understand her situation. Please don't be so angry. I looked at the two of them, father and son, echoing each other like a rehearsed act, and felt nothing. Not sympathy. Not forgiveness. Not even pain anymore. All I heard was Bianca's had it hard, Bianca's struggling, Bianca needs understanding. No one spared a thought for me, the woman who had worked, saved, sacrificed, trusted, and been betrayed. They were mourning for a woman I never owed anything to while dismissing the woman who had built this home, this life, this family. And with every good intention they tried to wrap it in, they only crushed what little trust one had left. When I heard that, I couldn't help but turn to look at Matt, my eyes filled with disbelief. A $1.3 million act of kindness? How generous of him. This was the same man who used to scrutinize every grocery receipt, who quibbled over nickels and dimes with me, yet had no problem pouring money into a woman who wasn't even part of this family. And suddenly it hit me, I hadn't really known my own son at all. I tested the waters. You knew about all this? Matt's shoulders stiffened, and for a moment, a flicker of guilt crossed his face. Then he gave a forced laugh. I mean, only what Dad mentioned, that's all. Don't overthink it, Mom. I looked at the two of them, father and son, in perfect sync, and all I could do was laugh bitterly. So I was the only one left in the dark. The woman who had loved this family, supported it for decades, was the only one who didn't know the truth. My husband, the man I'd spent my life with, and my son, the boy I raised with my own hands, had both been standing on someone else's side all along. It was absurd. Utterly absurd. A tightness grew in my chest. The hurt was impossible to contain now. Stella, come on, Lewis said again, switching to that familiar soft tone he always used when he wanted to smooth things over. We've been together so many years. Don't make this into a big scene. That was his pattern. Playing the pitiful old man, leaning on sentiment, hiding behind decades of marriage like a shield. There was a time when those words would have softened me, made me second-guess myself. But not anymore. I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice calm but firm. If you want to help Bianca, that's your business. But you don't get to use my money. I'm sorry, but I'm not that generous. 40 years of marriage, $1.3 million. You pay it back and I'll pretend none of this ever happened. His expression changed instantly. His face twisted as if I'd just flipped a switch. He yanked his hand from mine and exploded, voice thick with rage. Are you out of your mind? $1.3 million. Where do you expect me to get that kind of money? Bianca is my best friend. I thought you'd understand. I always thought you were compassionate, that you cared about people. Turns out you're just cold-hearted. He looked at me like he was the one betrayed. I felt a chill run through me. And then I laughed again, short, cold, bitter. Moral guilt trips. His favorite tactic. But I wasn't the naive 20-something woman he married. I'd spent decades working in a company, navigating office politics, dealing with people of every kind. Did he really think a few manipulative words could break me? I was about to walk away when Matt cut in again, his voice edged with impatience. Mom, do you really have to make this such a big deal? I mean, come on. Aunt Bianca's had it rough. Let's just drop it. No more money from now on, okay? The way he said Aunt Bianca made my stomach turn. So familiar. So casual. Warmer than anything he'd said to me all day. And suddenly I realized, if someone else had been standing in the room, they'd probably think she was his real mother. Their hearts had left me long ago. So why should I keep clinging to this family? I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay composed. Then I looked Lewis squarely in the face and said in the calmest voice I'd ever spoken, I want a divorce. The words came out quietly, but they echoed with finality. They were not an outburst. They were a decision forged in sleepless nights and tear-stained silence. Lewis stared at me, stunned. Then his face contorted with anger. No, he growled through clenched teeth. Absolutely not. I won't divorce you. Over my dead body. I looked at him. This man who had betrayed me, lied to me, used me, and I just couldn't understand. If you loved her so much, why couldn't you just leave with her? Why hang on to me like this? But I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear the answer anymore. As I was done. From that day on, I didn't speak another word to him. The house turned cold, as if all the warmth had been drained from its walls. The silence was suffocating. I started cooking only for myself. I no longer cared about his preferences or routines. I made the food I liked, vibrant dishes full of steam and color, a stark contrast to the chill that hung in the air. What I didn't expect was that Louis stopped eating leftovers altogether. Instead, he began ordering takeout, burgers, fried chicken, pizza, every kind of fast food imaginable. I could hear him at the door, chatting casually with delivery drivers as he signed for each meal. His voice was light, friendly, like nothing had happened. And in the kitchen, as I listened to those distant conversations, a dull ache bloomed in my chest. Over 40 years of marriage, and aside from the brief spark of romance in our first year, most of our meals had been leftovers or the same reheated canned vegetables over and over again. Louis had spent half his life preaching about thrift, saving electricity, saving water, cutting open toothpaste tubes to squeeze out the last drop. That was the man I lived with. No. Now that he was feeding himself, suddenly takeout was a daily ritual. Burgers, barbecue, sushi, even steak dinners at upscale restaurants. The irony was unbearable. I looked at the lavish meals he now indulged in and thought about all those years I lived under his rules, counting every penny, denying myself the smallest comforts. No. Now he was living like a man who had never known the meaning of restraint. A few quiet days passed like that, cold, distant, unspoken. Then unsurprisingly, Louis tried to reconcile again. Only this time he brought reinforcements. Bianca heard about the tension between us, he said almost sheepishly. She wants to meet you. I simply nodded. Not because I had any desire to mend this broken marriage, but out of pure curiosity. I wanted to see what kind of woman was worth my husband secretly siphoning away over $1 million of our life savings. Louis quickly arranged the meeting. What I didn't expect was that Bianca didn't come alone. Matt showed up too, and he brought Mason with him. "Grandma Bianca. You smell so nice. You're my favorite," Mason shouted, flinging himself into Bianca's arms with pure delight. Bianca's smile bloomed instantly, radiant and maternal, as she gently held him close, her lips curling into a soft, practiced smile. Something inside me sank. This didn't feel like a peace offering, it felt like a coronation. She didn't come here to reconcile, she came to claim her place, like she had already become the queen of this household. And the worst part was, maybe she had. I stood there, watching my grandson nuzzle into the arms of a woman I barely knew, and my eyes began to sting. She had woven herself into my family while I was still naively living under the illusion of security. Into my husband, my son, even my grandson. "Mom, finally. Bianca's been waiting for you. What took you so long?" Matt said with a casual tone that jabbed straight through me. That subtle note of blame, like I was the one disrupting the harmony of this cozy little family, cut deeper than anything else. Bianca turned toward me, smiling sweetly. "Stella, it's been so long. You look wonderful." I managed a polite nod and a forced smile. She slipped easily into small talk, speaking like we'd always been old friends. And in no time she steered the conversation toward herself. "Stella, I've never had an easy life," she began, her voice trembling. "I was young and foolish, believed in the wrong man, ended up raising a child alone. And my poor boy, he was born with a heart condition. Years of hospital visits, medications. It's been so hard." Her eyes filled with tears and soon they spilled over, streaking her carefully applied makeup. She clutched my hand like she was seeking comfort, or more likely validation. Louis, sitting beside her, looked heartbroken. Without hesitation he took her hand in his and said, "Don't cry, Bianca. As long as I'm here you'll never suffer again." His voice was soft, tender, intimate. And in that moment I realized he hadn't forgotten how to love. He hadn't lost the ability to be gentle. He'd just chosen to give it all to someone else. Matt chimed in, smiling. "Yeah, Aunt Bianca, you've always been so good to me and Mason. Don't worry, anything you need, we're here for you." I looked around at the scene, at Louis, Bianca, Matt, Mason, and felt like a stranger in my own life. A hollow, icy feeling crept up from deep within me. I took a breath, then said coldly, "You love her so much? Then divorce me. Marry her. At least then you'll have a good excuse." The room went silent. Louis's face went rigid, his jaw clenching. He turned quickly to Bianca, apologetic. "Don't mind her, she's just been upset lately. She didn't mean it." Bianca waved it off with a gracious smile. "It's okay. I'm the one who owes Stella an apology. I should have come forward sooner." I opened my mouth to speak but Louis cut me off again. What apology? You don't need to apologize for anything. That money, I gave it because I wanted to. Don't let this weigh on your conscience. I'll handle things with Stella. Then he looked at me with that same condescending smile he'd always used to dismiss my feelings. She's just temperamental. I'll calm her down. As if I was some stubborn child throwing a tantrum. But he'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't that woman anymore. He still believed I would never actually leave him. Truth is, I used to believe that too. But not anymore. Especially now, after all the rotten secrets behind this so-called life had finally come to light, I was more certain than ever of one thing. I would never again be anyone's fool. Even if I dropped dead tomorrow, I'd make damn sure these people didn't walk away unscathed. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay level as I looked at Louis and Matt. I'd like to speak to Bianca. Alone. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw Louis tense up. Why can't we all just talk here? Bianca's not in good health. You don't need to upset her. He said it like I was some kind of ticking bomb and she was a fragile porcelain doll that might shatter from a sharp word. The pain in my chest twisted again, sharp, sudden. So this was how far his instinct to protect her went? The deeper his loyalty to her showed, the more ridiculous my decades-long marriage felt. A cruel, elaborate joke, played on me with my own life as the punchline. And if I couldn't reclaim even a shred of justice before I died, I knew I'd never rest in peace. I forced a bitter smile and said, calm but laced with irony, I just want to talk. After all, she's spent decades enjoying the fruits of my labor. A conversation doesn't seem like too much to ask. Bianca bit her lip, eyes wide in a performance of delicate concern. Louis, it's fine, she said softly, like she was a saint volunteering for martyrdom. Stella's upset. Let her vent, it might help her feel better. The moment she said it, Louis shot me a glare as if I were the unreasonable one. I nearly laughed. The older they get, the more skilled these sugar-coated manipulators become. A few minutes later, the living room was empty, just me and Bianca facing off. But the moment the others were out of earshot, the sweet, gentle facade she wore outside evaporated. Her eyes narrowed, her posture shifted, and the smugness returned. Oh, please, she scoffed, lifting her chin. You're 65, Stella. And you're still throwing tantrums like some teenager over a divorce. She laughed mockingly. Here's some advice. Just pretend none of this happened. Play dumb, live out your days in peace. No one's going to give you a medal for being the dramatic wife. Her voice dripped with condescension like I was some pitiful joke she'd grown tired of watching. I stared at her and for a moment I was pulled straight back to our youth. We'd never gotten along. Yes, she was beautiful, but she was also a disaster in school, always trailing at the bottom of the class. I, on the other hand, was average in looks but top of the rankings year after year. Her parents constantly compared her to me, using me as their benchmark to scold her. Naturally, she grew to hate me. No, resent me. So much so that she once had a few of her admirers corner me after class, trying to teach me a lesson. But I was never one to be bullied. I saw it coming and called the cops before they could even touch me. Caused a huge stir. She was disciplined by the school and whatever fake civility we had completely disintegrated. And now, decades later, here we were again, sitting across from each other, still tangled in conflict, still at odds. But I wasn't the same girl I used to be. I wouldn't play the fool for a man, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her waltz in and act like this was her victory lap. I leaned in slightly, my voice as cold as ice. Bianca, you've always acted like you were above everyone else. But in the end you spent decades as someone's side piece. Doesn't that feel pathetic? Her eyebrow twitched and the smugness on her face faltered ever so slightly. I smiled, cold and deliberate. Out of old times, Sake, I'll do you a favor. I'll hand him over. Take him. I hope you two enjoy each other's company for the rest of your miserable lives. But you owe me $1.3 million. I expect every cent back. My words sliced through the air like a blade. But Bianca didn't flinch. She leaned back in her seat, tilting her head with a smirk, looking completely at ease. You think you can scare me into giving you anything? She let out a soft laugh like she'd just heard the punchline to a ridiculous joke. You're really cute when you try to act tough. That money was a gift from Louis, Bianca said, leaning back in her chair, her tone smug and self-assured. Why on earth would I give it back to you? I looked at her and let out a soft chuckle. Ignorance really is fearless. She thought I'd spent all these years just cooking, cleaning, and quietly playing the devoted wife. She had no idea I'd long since learned how to protect myself. With the law, not just loyalty. Even in divorce, I could reclaim every cent legally. But I wouldn't tell her that. Because uncertainty, that creeping, gnawing fear of the unknown, is the most effective punishment of all. I looked at her coolly. You really think Louis and Matt being on your side means you've won? Open your eyes, Bianca. Louis has been a pitiful little man his whole life, good at saving pennies, useless at everything else. And Matt? He's a man-child who couldn't land a job without riding my coattails and tapping into my connections. You think without me the two of them could keep living the cozy life you've grown used to? Think again. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Just a crack, but it was enough to satisfy me. I smirked, turned on my heel and headed for the door. And there they all were, Louis, Matt and Mason, hovering anxiously just outside. The moment I stepped out, not one of them even looked at me. They rushed past like I didn't exist, crowding around Bianca with exaggerated concern. I stood in the doorway watching the scene, this picture-perfect little family unit I no longer belonged to. I let out a dry, cynical laugh, turned away and walked out without a second glance. This time I was truly done. I felt no love for this house, no lingering attachment to these people. Not my son, not my husband, they were no longer mine. That very night I called my attorney. Not just for a divorce. I wanted everything that was mine, every penny, every asset, taken back. The lawyer was straightforward. Louis's unauthorized transfers from my personal account were legally questionable. The house was listed under my name. It had been part of my employment benefits package. I had the right to claim a significant portion of our assets in the divorce. After the call, I wasted no time. I called a locksmith and changed every lock in the house. This was my home. The deed bore my name. I'd kept quiet all these years out of respect for our marriage. That chapter was closed now. From this moment on, everything would be clearly defined. Every dollar, every inch of space. That evening Louis came home. He tried his key and failed. The lock didn't budge. Moments later my phone buzzed. It was him. I didn't bother answering. I walked calmly to the door, opened it and tossed all his luggage and personal belongings out onto the porch. Louis, I said flatly, I told you I want a divorce. He stood there, shaking with rage. Stella, you're too old to be throwing tantrums. First you go after Bianca, now you're locking me out of the house? You think you're still 20, huh? What are you gonna do after the divorce? Rot alone in here till someone finds your corpse. His shouting echoed up the stairwell, loud and pathetic. Under the porch light, his white hair glowed starkly. He no longer looked like the gentle, mild-mannered man I'd married. He looked like what he truly was, a bitter old man, cornered and desperate, showing his worst self. I said nothing. I simply reached behind the door and tossed a folder at his feet. The divorce papers. Whether I rot or not is none of your business. All you need to do is sign. His pupils dilated. He fumbled with the pages and flipped straight to the asset division section. His face turned beet red. You're insane, he shouted. You want to leave me with nothing and make me pay you another $1 million. Have you lost your damn mind? I've been supporting this family all these years. Taking care of everything. Don't I get any credit for that? I stared at him with icy calm, saying nothing. Then without warning he lunged toward the door, trying to force his way back in. This is my house too. You can't throw me out, I'm still your husband. He looked like a caricature of himself. Spitting, snarling, trying to bulldoze his way through with nothing but arrogance. But I was ready. I picked up a broom and swung it toward him without hesitation. He stumbled back, swearing as he clutched his things and retreated down the stairs. You're crazy. Lunatic. A bitter old hag. I should have left you years ago. Divorce is the best thing that's ever happened to me. His curses echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls, growing fainter and fainter with each step he took. I stood at the threshold and watched as the door swung shut again. So this was how decades of marriage ended. A cheap, embarrassing farce. The man who once made my heart flutter had become the man I now wished I'd never met. No matter how many times I told myself, this wasn't my fault, that I hadn't done anything wrong, the pain still came in waves. It wasn't a sharp, clean wound. It was more like 100 tiny needles pricking at my heart. Subtle, relentless, impossible to ignore. Louis hadn't been gone long before Matt called. Mom, you kicked Dad out, What do you think that does? You're just handing him over to Bianca. Who wouldn't want someone by their side in old age? Someone to care for them. And if you really go through with this divorce, don't expect me to be the one looking after you. If you pick him up tomorrow, bring him home, I'll pretend none of this ever happened. Then he hung up. I stared at the screen, stunned as a deep chill settled in my chest. My son, my own son, had already turned his back on me. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. His loyalty was firmly with Bianca now. The truth? Bianca had moved into the apartment across the hall from them 10 years ago. The cruelest part? That down payment had come from my salary. I flipped through Lewis's old ledger again, and there it was, plain as day, the record of the transfer. I didn't even know whether to call him clever or stupid, using my money to support another woman, and then writing it all down like some kind of proud achievement. And maybe Matt had considered Bianca his other mother for a long time now. During the years I was working around the clock, chasing deadlines, building a life for this family, Bianca had conveniently been there. Reading bedtime stories, baking cookies, smiling sweetly as she slowly inserted herself into the role I was too busy to play. But had Matt forgotten? Had he forgotten who sat by his bedside all night when he was burning with fever? Who stayed up through his every heartbreak, every failure, whispering encouragement when he thought the world had given up on him? Who made call after call, begged for favors, pulled strings just to get him that first job? All those years, all those sacrifices, outweighed by a few stories, some snacks, and a well-practiced smile. Well, if they didn't cherish what I'd given them, then I wasn't going to cling to it anymore. The next morning I gathered everything, every document, every record, every bit of evidence. I packed up Lewis's financial ledgers and all the recordings of our conversations, and sent them straight to my attorney. If Lewis wouldn't sign the divorce papers willingly, then the law would make him. A few hours later, the lawyer personally served him with the official divorce petition. He hadn't expected me to move so swiftly. He and Bianca completely lost control, yelling, shouting, even trying to throw the attorney out of the house. But this time I wasn't backing down. Shortly after, Matt called again. This time his voice was practically shaking with fury. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? You've got a heart of stone. Dad passed out from the stress and you're still pushing like this? What do you want? Do you want him dead?" I could hear his rage crackling through the phone, his voice rising to a shout. And yet all I felt was a slow, aching weight in my chest, something heavy and dull sinking deeper by the second. I didn't respond. I simply closed the phone gently and set it down on the table. They'd hurt me over and over, and now they wanted to play the victims. As if they were the ones wronged. As if all of this, every fracture, every scar, was somehow my fault. It was laughable. Utterly, painfully ironic. I didn't waste another breath on Matt's tantrum. I simply ended the call and cut him off completely. I was done pouring my time, energy, and heart into people who only knew how to take. From that moment on, everything would go through my attorney, clean, swift, and emotionless. While I waited for the court date, Lewis and Bianca seemed to be living quite the carefree life. They played the part of the blissful retirees perfectly, as if none of this had anything to do with me at all. Lewis even learned how to use social media. He posted photos on Facebook of candlelit dinners, braised chicken with mushrooms, grilled steak, Caesar salad, pasta with red wine. It was surreal to see him presenting meals so elaborate, so indulgent. The caption read, "Cooking for the one you love. Life's greatest joy." He shared snapshots of him and Bianca strolling through shopping malls, arms linked, smiles wide. In one he'd written, "A love from youth, still by my side in old age." The tenderness in his eyes as he looked at Bianca, that was something I had never once seen directed at me. I used to ask him to go grocery shopping with me, take a walk downtown, just spend some time together. He always claimed his back hurt, said he was too tired. I even offered to take him to see a doctor for it. Now I realized, it had nothing to do with his back. He just didn't want to be with me. The bitter irony? Their little parade of domestic bliss turned out to be the most useful part of my case. My attorney moved fast, handling everything with precise efficiency. I rejected all offers of mediation, made my stance crystal clear, and soon enough the court date was set. When the day came, Lewis and Bianca arrived at the courthouse together. Matt followed closely behind, standing beside them like some loyal bodyguard. At that point, whatever remnants of family we once had were long gone. Matt looked at me with a sneer, letting out a sharp, dismissive snort. Dragging this into court at your age, what a disgrace. Bianca and Dad have been nothing but kind to you, and you're still trying to tear them apart. What kind of person are you? Every word was laced with judgment, like I was the villain in some twisted fairy tale. The evil wife. The bitter mother. The ungrateful old woman. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I walked past him and entered the courtroom without so much as a glance back. This wasn't about justifying myself anymore. This was about winning. The proceedings began quickly. With the ledgers, transaction records, voice recordings, and screenshots of Louis's public declarations of affection for Bianca. All of it neatly documented and submitted. My case was airtight. The judgment came swiftly and decisively. Bianca was ordered to repay every cent Louis had funneled from my personal accounts, $1.35 million in total. And our marriage? Officially dissolved by court order. There was no ceremony. No closure. No signature on a divorce certificate. Just a crisp legal decree to mark the end of a 40-year mistake. When I stepped out of that courthouse, the sun hit my face. I tilted my head upward, breathing in the light, and for the first time in years I felt clean. Unburdened. Free. I had finally closed the door on a life that had been suffocating me. And now here I was, recently retired with a house in my name, money in my account, no stingy, self-righteous husband weighing me down, and no son who saw me as nothing more than a financial resource. For the first time my life truly belonged to me. As for Louis and Bianca, the cracks on their faces were unmistakable as they left the courthouse. Their lifestyle had always depended on me, on my labor, my earnings, my blind trust. They had almost nothing to fall back on. And Matt, despite all his self-righteous grandstanding, was nothing more than a taker. He'd never provide for them, not a cent. The only way for Louis and Bianca to pay back that $1.35 million judgment was to sell their house. And that house, the one across from Matt's, the one they clung to so proudly, I had paid the down payment on that house. So really all they were doing was returning what was mine in the first place. Once I realized that, I felt something shift inside me. That heavy weight that had pressed on my chest for years. It finally lifted. Everything they spent, everything they took, everything they thought they got away with, it was all coming back to me. Every last cent. Every inch. And I wouldn't leave a single piece behind. Stella. After all these years, do you really have to push me this far? Louis stood before me, his face drawn, his voice heavy with defeat. The weariness in his eyes was impossible to hide. Now that the court had ruled against them, suddenly they wanted to talk about compassion. About forgiveness. About letting things go. What a joke. Would they have shown me mercy if I hadn't uncovered everything? Of course not. They would have kept bleeding me dry until I grew too old, too tired, or simply died. They never hesitated when it came to taking from me. Still, out of decades of shared history, I said one last civil word. You'd better sell the house quickly. Don't wait for a court-ordered enforcement. At your age, do you really want to face police at your door? That kind of shame doesn't wash off. I turned to leave. But Bianca grabbed my arm. Stella, please, don't do this, she said, her voice cracking with tears. We really don't have that kind of money anymore. You already have everything you won. Louis is all I have left. Maybe the three of us could just start over, she stammered, eyes wide and watery. I'll take care of both of you, cook, clean, whatever you need. Let me repay you that way, please. Her voice trembled with emotion, but every word made my skin crawl. I hadn't expected her to sink this low, to trade dignity for comfort so shamelessly, just to keep living a life she didn't earn. She wasn't a helpless woman. She was a parasite, one who'd grown fat off others' kindness and knew exactly how to play weak when it suited her. I looked her dead in the eye and let out a cold laugh. Bianca, everything I have, this house, this money, this life, was earned $1 at a time through decades of hard work. Not through tears or pity. And certainly not through groveling. Then I turned to Louis. Stop dreaming about things that don't belong to you. Sell the house, pay what you owe, and move on. Whatever happens to you afterward isn't my concern. With that, I shoved Bianca's hand off my skirt and walked away without looking back. A few days later, Louis finally caved. The house was listed and sold, and the full repayment was transferred to my attorney's account, down to the last dollar. On the day of the sale, he was still unwilling to leave quietly. As I stepped outside, he stood by the front door, spitting venom. Stella, marrying you was the worst mistake of my life. Bianca and I will grow old together in peace. You'll die alone, clutching your precious money. I didn't even flinch. I didn't turn around. I simply smiled. The money was in my hands. They had nothing. The outcome couldn't have been clearer. Not long after, Louis and Bianca got married. They moved in with Matt, along with Bianca's grown son Andres. 6 people under one roof. The fairy tale quickly unraveled. Turns out, living together wasn't quite the same as occasional visits and cheerful dinners. Bianca used to help with Mason out of goodwill. But now Matt and his wife expected it as a duty. A full-time nanny under the same roof without thanks. The resentment started to show. Bianca's temper flared more often, her patience worn thin. And Andres, the overindulged, entitled boy she raised, couldn't stand seeing his mother treated any less than royalty. One day Andres lost control and shoved Mason so hard the boy hit his head and needed stitches. That evening my phone rang. It was Lily, Matt's wife, her voice shaking with tears. Stella, I can't take this anymore. That boy, Andres, he's out of control. There's something wrong with him. He's violent, unpredictable. I'm scared of what he'll do next. I'm running this whole household on my own. Mason's acting out, the baby won't stop crying, and every adult in this house is either yelling or sulking in silence. I don't know how I'm supposed to live like this anymore. Her voice cracked, half frustration, half desperation. Stella, can you help me? I knew what she meant. She wanted me to come back. To step in. To hold everything together again just like I always had. The backbone. The fixer. The quiet, dependable woman who kept this family from collapsing. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Because the truth was, we were no longer a family. I listened to Lily's tearful plea on the phone and sighed quietly before replying, calm but resolute. If your schedule gets overwhelming, I can help pick up and drop off Mason. But anything beyond that? I'm sorry, Lily, I just can't. A flash of embarrassment crossed her face, but she nodded gently. Thank you, Stella. I offered a few comforting words before ending the call. Then I put on my coat and stepped outside. Lately I'd developed a new love: photography. I carried my camera to the park almost every day, capturing sun-dappled shadows on the grass, the quiet bloom of flowers on street corners, the glint of light on passing windows. Each click of the shutter felt like bottling a moment of joy. A small proof that life still had light in it. And honestly, I was happier than I had ever been. Besides photography, I'd fallen in love with food again. Back when I was living under Louis's thumb, dinner was often nothing more than a bowl of leftover soup or reheated vegetables from the night before. Now my kitchen was alive again. Aromatic risottos, fresh-baked bread, crisp tacos bursting with flavor. Each dish felt like a celebration of self, like a little ribbon of color woven into the fabric of my new life. I realized, food was never just survival. It was comfort, joy, art. It was love just for myself. Then just as I was sinking into this new rhythm of peace, Lily called again, sobbing. Stella, I can't take it anymore. Please, can you watch Mason for a few days? She kept repeating herself, her voice unraveling with every word. I swear, I think I want a divorce. I paused, surprised. But I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be pulled back into anyone else's mess. But I understood her pain because I'd lived it. And this wasn't a tantrum. It was heartbreak. So I said yes. When I arrived to pick up Mason, I was just reaching the front door when the yelling inside the house stopped me in my tracks. Louis, can you believe Matt? He's kicking out my son like he's nothing. Bianca's voice screeched from behind the door. Andres isn't well, he needs care. Matt's trying to drive us out, he's trying to destroy me. Then Matt's voice snapped back, colder than I'd ever heard it. Andres is almost 30. What's he still doing living here like a child? He seems perfectly fine to me. I don't care what his issues are, he shouted. Bianca, either he goes or you both do. My wife isn't a nursemaid for your grown son. The house had descended into chaos. I stood quietly outside, listening to the unraveling of the happy home they once flaunted. Not so perfect now, was it? What they once mistook for peace and warmth had never been real. It was just me holding everything together. Quietly, patiently, invisibly. The moment I walked away, their facade cracked wide open, revealing nothing but discord and disarray beneath. I didn't knock. I simply sent Lily a text, asking her to bring Mason outside. She opened the door a few minutes later, eyes red-rimmed and trembling. The moment she saw me, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I really can't do this anymore. I'm taking care of everyone, Bianca, her son Mason, and all they do is complain. Do you know what she did last week? She took my wedding jewelry and sold it. Said she needed to buy Andres new clothes. Andres, he's unbearable. He bullies Mason, eats his snacks, even hit him once. Her words spilled out between sobs, each one heavier than the last. Mason cried too, holding tightly to her. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around both of them and held them gently. Then I took them out to eat. At dinner, I watched them settle, Lily's shoulders lowering, Mason's smile slowly returning. The tension in the air softened, and so did my heart. After we finished, we walked out into the cool evening air. That's when I saw Matt, standing in the parking lot, hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes hollow and tired, his face etched with frustration. He looked like a man unraveling at the seams, caught in the very chaos he once thought he could control. A man now reaping the life he so confidently chose. And for the first time I didn't feel bitter. I just felt free. I glanced at Matt, expressionless, then looked away. Mason will stay with me for a few days, I said calmly to Lily. Once things settle down at your place, I'll bring him back. She nodded, grateful but visibly exhausted. Just as I turned to leave, I heard Matt's voice, low, shaky, call out behind me. Mom. I paused. Mom, I was wrong. I really was. I was so stupid. I thought Bianca cared about us. I thought she was genuine. But now I see it, she only wanted our money. Mom, can you come back? His voice cracked, filled with remorse. So different from the arrogance he used to wear like a second skin. But it was too late. Yes, he had finally seen Bianca for who she really was. But I had also seen them for who they truly were. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I simply took Mason's hand and walked away. Whatever remained between mother and son had already eroded, lost in every time he defended outsiders over me. On the third day Mason was with me, Matt called again, this time frantic. Dad had a stroke, he said, his voice trembling. He's in the hospital. Please, can you come? I hesitated. Then, maybe out of habit or maybe just for closure, I went. It had been months since I'd seen Louis. He looked frail and unrecognizable, his hair now fully white, his skin ashen, sunken. He lay in the hospital bed like a withered husk, his breath shallow, eyes dim, until they landed on me. Then something flickered in them. He tried to lift his hand to speak, but nothing came. Only tears welled in his eyes. Matt stepped in. Bianca tried to take money from Dad. When he refused, she and her son pushed him. He hit the floor hard. After that, they cleaned out the house, jewelry, electronics, everything. We've already filed a police report. Doctors said he'll likely never walk again. Matt's voice trembled as if expecting me to break down or at least feel something. But I didn't. It all felt like the final scene in a play I'd already read 1,000 times. I knew the ending. I turned to leave. Stella. Louis rasped behind me, trying to reach for my hand. As his fingers inched toward mine, I stepped back. His eyes instantly filled with tears, his voice thick with regret. I'm sorry. I thought maybe I'd feel something then. Pity, vindication, even relief. But I didn't. I looked at him coldly. There's nothing left between us. You don't owe me an apology. We're strangers now. And with that, I turned and walked out. Matt ran after me down the hallway. Mom, Dad's in no condition to care for himself. We both have jobs, we can't manage this alone. Can you just help a little? Just check in now and then? I looked at him. This son who once called me cold, who once told me not to expect anything from him, and all I saw was desperation disguised as duty. The hypocrisy was staggering. Now that their lives had spiraled, now that their happily ever after had crumbled, suddenly I was useful again? I gave him a hard, bitter smile. No. We're divorced. You're an adult. I raised you. I owe you nothing more. From today on, don't ever come to me again. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Matt's voice rose in frustration. I'm your son. You could at least help me. How can you be so heartless? I'm struggling and you don't even care. I heard him choke on his own words, but I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. He'd forgotten something. This path, they chose it. And I I simply chose not to be dragged down by it any longer. Suddenly my vision spun a little. My steps faltered. A nurse nearby reached out to steady me. I took a deep breath, steadied myself and kept walking. I never looked back. Later I heard that Bianca and her son had been arrested. Turns out that heart condition she wept about for years was a lie. The doctors found nothing wrong with him. Not a single thing. It had all been a long con. A sob story carefully crafted to trap Louis, to manipulate him, to drain him dry. Her son had been aimless for years. No job, no direction, just a parasite trailing his mother's shadow. No one wanted to take responsibility for him. No one could. Except Louis, the old fool so eager to play savior. Bianca clung to him like a lifeline, her hands around his neck for decades, until he had nothing left to give. People always pay for their choices. Sooner or later. And Louis? He paid in full. Time is a strange thing. It doesn't rewind. It doesn't pause until you're ready. It simply moves forward, quietly, steadily, taking you through one turn after another until one day you finally understand. Life was never just about a marriage, a family, a dinner table, or the years you gave to someone who didn't deserve them. Life is about you. After walking away from that relationship, I didn't fade into loneliness or disappear into silence like they all predicted I would. Quite the opposite, I finally started living for myself. I enrolled in a photography class and met a group of vibrant, like-minded people my age who still believed in adventure. I joined a travel club and together, we visited places I had only ever seen on TV. Secluded cabins in the woods of Maine, sunlit summer towns near Lake Tahoe and Vermont's mountains painted in autumn red and gold. I even learned to paddle a canoe. On quiet nights I'd drive myself to outdoor movie screenings, sit under the stars with a blanket, and feel more alive than I ever did at a dining table full of forced conversations. Sometimes I took Mason along. He'd run ahead and I'd chase after him with my camera, laughing as I snapped pictures of his joy in motion. I printed those photos, framed them and placed them all around my living room. The old family portraits, the stiff smiles, the forced togetherness, they've all been tucked away in a box. In their place are these new memories. My own memories. Real, free and vibrant. No more strained grins. No more pretending. Just moments that are honest and mine. As for Matt and Lily, eventually their marriage came to an end. The weight of daily life crushed whatever fragile bond they had left. Arguments, silences, disappointments, they finally wore each other down. Neither had the strength to keep pretending. Lily packed up and moved out with Mason. She started over. I didn't judge her. I didn't offer advice. I didn't say much at all. But on the day they left, I made a table full of her favorite dishes. I hugged her gently. And I pulled Mason into my arms one more time. "You're a good mother," I told her softly. Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded. Matt eventually moved into a small apartment alone. Every now and then he would call to share some updates. His voice quieter now, worn around the edges, no longer sharp with entitlement but dulled by life and regret. That's how life works, I suppose. Some people have to crash headfirst into their own consequences before they feel the pain. I'm not cold. I've just learned not to keep cutting myself open to bandage others. I've also come to accept a deeper truth. Not every relationship is worth saving. Not every bond deserves forgiveness. What truly matters isn't who stays. It's whether you stayed true to yourself. Now I no longer compromise for anyone. I no longer lower myself to fit someone else's comfort. I cook meals just for me. I brew tea in the early morning sunlight that floods my kitchen. I open a new book and read quietly until afternoon, letting the world slow down for just a while. I'm no longer somebody's wife. No longer someone's shadow. I'm simply me. And for the first time in my life I'm finally living on my own terms. The years ahead may be short, but I have enough time left to shape this life into something I love. This time the story belongs to me.